Good morning, everybody. Curtis Wilkerson here with Inside Arkansas and the Pod at the Palace for another episode of the Hoop Hogs Video Mailbag. You asked me an Arkansas basketball related question. I answer it. You know the drill by this time. We're trying to do one of these every single day until the start of the season. So let's get right into it and see what we've got. Another banger from Kingsley. He says, I'm intrigued by TB, talking Trevon Brazile here, his comments on practice about more individual work under John Calipari versus more teamwork under Eric Musselman. How does this benefit TB? How does this impact the team as a whole? And so for those who are wondering, like, what do you mean Trevon Brazile's comments? In the post-summer press conference, he was one of the players that we were able to talk to, and he was asked, like, what are the differences that you've noticed in a Muss practice versus a Coach Cal practice? And those were kind of his responses there. Now, I got to be honest with you, Kingsley, like, as soon as I heard that, I immediately wanted to call Cap. And the reason why is because Eric Musselman traditionally, he's like the station king at practice, and they do a ton of drills and individual work. And very rarely do they line up 5-on-5 and scrimmage and go live. And it's something he's talked about a lot, and something that I've heard from a lot of different players, and something that I've observed with my own eyes at the practices that I've been able to attend. And I haven't been in a John Calipari practice yet, so I don't know if it's just if even more to that extreme, maybe, or whatever. I'm sure there are some differences there. But when I heard that right away, I was like, oh, what's he talking about? It almost struck me as like a question he wasn't really sure how to answer. And so the first thing that came to his head was, oh yeah, well, we're doing a lot of individual stuff with Coach Cal. So let me just go ahead and say that. So hopefully we get to check out a practice here soon, and maybe I can give a little bit more clarification on that. But I did find it interesting given Muss's track record at practices. But my hope, I think, for TB is what he meant by that was more one-on-one time to work on things with coaches for skill development. Insert Kenny Payne, right? Move like a guard, think like a big, whatever it was that he said there. But, that's the biggest thing about this Kenny Payne addition to the coaching staff is what he brings to the table in terms of developing front court players, big men. And in ways, Trevon Brazile's unique. He's more of a stretch forward kind of guy. But one of the things you want from him is more, toughness, grit, whatever. Think like a big man, maybe. And I think Kenny Payne can really help bring that to him from a developmental standpoint. And, what I will say about this is I like the emphasis on getting comfortable being uncomfortable. It's something Coach Callis said a ton. That you've heard the players harp on it a little bit too, because that's kind of what Trevon needs. And so when I think about practices, the ways he was utilized with Muss versus how we might see it with Cal, I've called it Muss malpractice in the past, and I'll continue to do that. I'll tell him that. I'm not the basketball genius that he is, but I just don't think they use Trevon Brazile in a way that accentuates his strengths and the attributes he brings to the table. He's floating around on the perimeter, acting like a wing, settling for shooting threes, playing off the ball, as opposed to being in ball screens and really serving as a mismatch problem that he could as a 4 or a 5. So I never really understood that. So I like this challenge of putting him in situations that make him uncomfortable so he can be comfortable in those situations in games. I like the challenge of embracing an attack dog mentality, because that's one of the things that you see it at times with TB, and he's got some edge to him and he talks his talk, but you want to see that play out more from the toughness and physicality standpoint in the game between the lines. Now it's up to Trevon Brazile, obviously, like whether or not he accepts that challenge. But I think John Calipari is exactly what TB needs, because if your dream and your goal is to rebuild your draft stock and get to the league, who the hell else are you going to listen to than John Calipari, a guy who's gotten, over 50 players into the league. And he's certainly talented enough to get there if he embraces the things that he needs to work on. So, and I think TB, he's caught a lot of criticism from the fan base. And it's not everyone, but I see it all the time in comments, and a lot of these mailbags I'm doing when it's, who should we pump the brakes on, or who needs to be the most proved, or whatever. I see a lot of, flack that TB is catching. And I think some of that is because there are obviously really high expectations for him last season, and Arkansas as a whole fell well short of expectations. And, he was coming off of an injury. He was in and out of the lineup. You just expected more. And the hope is that in the second year removed from that injury, that he can really pick it up and get back to where he was pre-injury. And a lot of times you see that in year two. But again, he's got to embrace some things and improve on some things. Would like to see him be more of a threat in the paint. I would like to see him become more of a lob threat again, which is something that I think is one of his best attributes. We just didn't see it as much last year for whatever reason. And then obviously the 3-pointer, I think, is a big part of his game. It's something that makes him enticing to, NBA front offices, but it doesn't need to be the only part of your game, especially on the offensive end. And we'll see if Kenny Payne can tough him up there. As far as how that philosophy impacts the entire team, like more indie versus teamwork. To me, like, I think the jury's still out. I just want to see. In terms of team impact, like summers are really for skill development and drill work, right? And turning weaknesses into strengths from an individual standpoint. And the reason why is because you're so limited in the time that you can have on the court. You get 8 hours a week together as a team during the summer. But 4 of them have to be in the weight room or doing strength and conditioning. And so you only get 4 hours a week to be on the floor, with the coaching staff working on stuff. So it is a lot of, drills and skill development and everything like that, and not so much install of your offense and getting up and down and scrimmaging. So I do think that will change a little bit once we get into the season. I hope it does. Philosophically, for me, as a former coach, and I know not everybody will agree with this, and that's okay. It's each their own. But come full practice time, uh, play, right? Play. I've never been a huge fan of breakdown drills, and I think the reason why for me is I get it. Like, you have to build in your system and coverages and everything that from that standpoint. But why spend so much time practicing 2-on-2? What's going to be 5-on-5 in a game? I mean, it's kind of taking away some key things that you have to consider there. So I get it with some of those breakdown things. And maybe you do that early, but once you get on into the year and close to the games, I think you got to play. And that doesn't mean just not the Mike Anderson roll the ball out and just go out there and scrimmage for 2 hours every day kind of deal. No, you can be intentional with what you're doing. Do your shell drill 5-on-5 to work on your help side, work on your rotations defensively. Do situational stuff where you're working on, game management, given the score, time, whatever. Work on your baseline out of bounds plays 5-on-5, your sets, your coverages. Do those things live. It can be half court. It can get up and down. We used to go where we would go live, and if you get a stop, you go one transition and run a set on the other end to work on your transition defense. So I think there's a lot of ways you can be intentional and get your point across and teach the things you need to teach without doing a ton of breakdown drills. And I think that's going to be actually important for this Arkansas team, because the biggest thing for them, it's not about how talented they are, despite what weird graphics on the internet say. It's more or less about how does this team gel and come together. And to me, the best way to build chemistry is to play together. Right. And you can only do that in practice settings up until you get into the game. So I will be interested to see what Calipari's philosophy is on this, because he traditionally has a decent amount of turnover on his rosters with as many guys as he sends to the draft. And he brings in a lot of young freshmen. And it's fascinating because obviously those guys have to get stronger and improve on certain things individually. But he's also got to bring those guys together as a team. He always talks about what we are in November is not what we're going to be in March, and trust the process. And I wonder how that factors into the way he practices with his teams, who have a lot of new pieces and new players out there. We're going to see a lot of scrimmaging and 5-on-5. Or are they going to continue to do a lot of this breakdown stuff and see if they can form that chemistry on the floor against somebody else? I don't know, but it is a really good question, and something I'm going to be anxious to keep an eye on and see what it looks like moving forward. But appreciate the question, Kingsley, my man, as always. And for everybody who's wondering how to get involved in this, hop over on X, Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays. And I have a pinned thread on my profile at Kurt Wilkerson _. So if you got a question, hop to that Hoop Hogs video mailbag thread, throw it in there. If you watch these videos on YouTube, make sure you just get in the comments, throw a question in there too. We'll find them and we'll get to them eventually Every morning, 8 a.m. is when we put these out. We're going to continue to do that up to the start of the college basketball season that we're all excited about. But I'm going to get out of here and we're going to do this all over again tomorrow. Make sure you get subscribed to our YouTube channel at Inside Arkansas. It's been Curtis Wilkerson with the Pod at the Palace. We'll see you guys again bright and early tomorrow.